one more day to go, then I can start the Facebook stuff hopefully tomorrow.
Good show. I'm finally out of Facebook jail.
No, I mean, with my new profile, I can actually transmit to it. I'm not by any means out of that mess. And they should protect their users. They shouldn't just slam you with whatever. They should protect their users.
Well, yeah, you're guilty by association, by one mistake, and
One
and
mistake and you're guilty. And they should protect you from things like that.
Yeah, they should, or at least be understanding when they know that all these traps are out there.
Yeah,
and you're gonna, like, you fell into it. I've done the same thing. I've just, there's something, and I click on it, and it's not, and then it turns out to be a problem.
Yeah.
It's not like you did anything malicious.
Yep, exactly. All right. Anyway, so the new Canadian Future Party officially launched last week, and they also at the same time announced two that it's got candidates for two by-elections. One is the Montreal riding of Lascelles-Emard-Verdun, and the other one is Elmwood Transcona, which is in Winnipeg.
Yeah,
and they've announced their candidates for those two elections. So this is a brand new party.
So the first thing I like to do is ask our audience, if they're listening at this time, do you think we need another party? Now, I don't think we got probably about a dozen qualified parties already, and most of the time you don't see them showing up very much. But if you're at the polls, like I was at different times, so you get a certain amount of votes for the Christian Heritage Party and things like that we don't normally hear about, but they're out there. There's the Communist Party, the Canadian Communist Party, etc.
Yeah, I know.
There's we've had a new party, the People's Party of Canada, and it hasn't done too well. Now, this particular party claims it is a centrist party. However, its previous name was the Centerized Conservatives or something like that. So it definitely has some sort of roots in moderate conservatism. But its claim to fame, or its hopeful claim to fame, will be that it is a centrist party. And if you're like me, you quite often get fed up with the traditional parties, and you think they're just bogged down with the same supporters and the campaign money that comes their way, and they owe too much to whoever puts them in power. So you think it's time for another party, something a little bit more reasonable. Right now, I feel that a lot of the parties work on idealism rather than practicalism. And the current Conservative Party is saying, well, we're going to do common sense politics. But can you really believe that when they are an established party and they're going to have to pay back to their donors favors of things? So I ask our listeners, do you think we need a party like this, a centrist party?
Well, yeah, and that's a very good question. Do we need? Here's the big question we've got. It's like and it's not just here in Canada; it's the same everywhere. As you say, there are political parties out there that have particular leanings, and they've been sponsored. Let's put it that way. Put it nicely. They've been sponsored by certain certain individuals or certain corporations, certain groups in our you know, in society, and you know, not necessarily are they good for the whole country, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we end up with Parliament effectively being run by lobbies, and that's not a good situation. Essentially, the trouble with lobbies is that you don't have one vote per person. You know, a lobbyist gets 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 votes. You know, people who are in lobbies get 6 or 7 votes because they're constantly going on at Parliament. You know, whereas people in you know, in normal everyday people don't get that kind of opportunity. Yeah, you might go up to Ottawa and you might say, hey, I want to go and see Mr. Baldinelli because I believe I need to understand about this, or I've got a chip on my shoulder about that. You know, most people don't have the same lobby power as big corporates or even big unions, for example, and that lobby power goes a long way. And one of the problems I think that we have in society also is that many of the traditional parties have also lost focus, right? They've never had your or my interest at heart. They tend to be interested in one thing: getting our party back into power.
Yeah, that's the prime reason for candidates to do that, because, of course, if you have a belief system that we're better than others, so our party's better than others, we may not be perfect, but we're better than them. So, of course, you want to get your party back in. But then, how much can you do if you owe so much to the people who have supported your campaign monetarily? I mean, it's much more of an issue in the United States than it is here with their super PACs and all the others. The donor class in the United States is corrupting democracy. If you, I mean, I think that's true, but I don't know if it's that bad up here.
It's not as bad, but it still has a major impact.
Now, you have a sudden reversal in Canadian politics as well as in American politics, whereas the Conservatives, usually those who speak on behalf of business and sort of the more moneyed people of the country, are now the ones that are speaking on behalf of the working class. If you go to our parliament and you listen to Pierre Poilievre, and he talks about the people who've got all kinds of money and how the Liberals are pandering to those people who have money. That used to be the complaint of the Liberals and the NDP about the Conservatives. And the Conservatives are saying, you're not paying any attention to the average person out there, the average wage earner at all. And Ford, as many complaints as we hear about Ford, still has 44% approval rating, which is amazing this far into his into his tenure. 44%, and the other parties aren't even close. That's in Ontario. So you have this, and a lot of that support is coming from the actual working guy who sees, and gal, who sees more factories being built, more roads, or whatever else being built. That means jobs. Actually, tomorrow we could talk about their new green initiative. With they actually have planned. They stopped the wind and solar thing and now have restarted it with gusto. They're looking for 5,000 megawatts from wind and solar coming up. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. But what I'm thinking of here is, like, there is a movement in the United States, well, all over the world, and it's called the realist movement. And that comes in a bunch of different varieties. And the most vocal of those, or the most famous of those lately, is a fellow by the name of John Mearsheimer. And I really do like listening to John Mearsheimer because he is what is called a realist. And he doesn't, that political movement doesn't really care about the idealism of things. They're
No.
looking at what really happens and what people really do and what governments really pursue, particularly internationally or domestic. And it's kind of a breath of fresh air because they're not looking, we're better than them kind of thing. We are this way and they're that way. And how do we, how do we do that? So I'm asking our listenership, do we really need a centrist party that will go down to the basics? And this party, the Future Party of Canada, says it's going to just get down to brass tacks and go after jobs and improve things and sort of keep the idealism on the outside and do the practical things that Canadians need on the inside. So they're going to focus on those things. And I don't know, do we need such a party?
I think we need a dose of more of a dose of realism. That's for sure. What you were just saying about there is an interesting thing, because I think my research about why people don't vote has largely come down to, the key factor is that there's a lot of people who are out there who I've been voting for this party all my life, whatever party, doesn't matter. Right? I've stopped voting because they've stopped listening to people like me. And this is part of the problem, is that we've got politics that has no care in the world about individuals and their problems anymore. And that basically the root of any political party's problems is, most political parties ignore the common person and the problems that they've got. And that's the truth of the matter.
Yes.
Realism plays an important role.
Yes, it does. How can you improve the life of a Canadian? And if you shut down a coal plant and the price of power goes up, it might be good for the environment, but is it good for the average person?
Yeah, and it's not good. You shut down that coal plant and it costs thousands of jobs, or that, as you say, is good for the environment, but not good for the people who lose the jobs there.
Now, this party used to be called the Center Ice Canadian Party. And of course, speaking of center, right? So Center Ice, but they've just come up with a new title, the Future Party of Canada, the Canadian Future Party, which has a very, and this is what they say, people don't really want new political party. People want, and this is somebody speaking on behalf, people want political parties that we have to be different from what they appear to be. Well, doesn't that mean you need a new party because they can't function as what they should be? And let me finish the quote. They want them to be focused on sensible issues, bigger paychecks, more jobs, better standard of living, and to pay attention to healthcare and environment. Well, isn't that a plug more for a new party rather than, we got to get our old parties to get refocused back on the real issues? Well, they've been at it for a long time now, and it's frustrated Canadians a lot. I would seriously consider a centrist party like that. Now they want to compare this to the fate of the People's Party of Canada and how it hasn't done that well. The People's Party of Canada is a far right party. That's a whole lot of difference. This is a party that says it's going to stay in the center and attack practical issues that Canadians are most care about, and those things that I just said.
Yeah.
So to reinvent the parties that are already there, the Conservatives, Liberals, and NDP, can you do that? They are old. They may be old, corrupt. Maybe their time has come. Maybe it is time for a new party to just zero in on what the realistic problems of the Canadian person, the individual. As you've said, you felt that the current political parties do not listen to you anymore. They're not interested in what Peter Giblett has to say. They're not interested in if Dave Wheeler's employed or not. You know, they're interested in, the NDP might be interested in transgender issues. The Liberal Party maybe want to shut down oil production in the West to make it look good that we're doing our bit with carbon. However, a practical party may say, okay, we need to take down that coal plant, but we need to keep it going for another 5 years or 10 years until we have a replacement. Yeah. Whereas a party like Trudeau might want to shut it down right now and buy our power from somewhere else. Or, see what I mean? Examples are maybe not that great.
And the practical approach, the practical approach is basically, it's got to look at the fact that, sure, we might need to replace coal. If we were making a decision that we've got to have this coal plant now, sure, we've got to have replace that coal plant because it's not green. But we've also got to consider the fact that we're losing miners' jobs, we're losing power workers' jobs, we're losing a lot of associated work, truckers' jobs, etc., and the whole cycle that goes into, right? And we need to actually figure out an alternative for those. And the trouble is with a lot, we don't figure out the alternative. We just shut it down because it's bad.
Well, remember, we used to make Toyota Corollas in Ontario. We made it for the whole world, or at least for the North American market. As soon as our power went up, as soon as they started shutting down coal plants and our power went up a lot, the Toyota pulled out their Corolla plant.
Yeah.
And when asked, was that anything to do with the power price? Oh, not at all. But that they're going to get as much power as they want, as dirty as they want in Mexico, where they now make the Corolla. So we lost that, and I really do believe that the price of power.
There's that whole industry. It's not just the net effect here; it's everywhere, isn't it? It sweeps across the entire thing. So you lose 1,000 jobs. And it's suddenly not 1,000 jobs, but 5,000 jobs that have gone because of this one closure. Yeah,
and let's say like McGuinty and then Wynne wanted to close down the old coal plants, and the Conservative Party before them already had plans to close them down in 2015, but they wanted to close them down in 2027. But they did eventually close them down by 2011, and they wouldn't even entertain the fact to take that stuff and give it to a developing country so they could have a coal plant and make power. So they're going to make sure that didn't happen. So they made sure they destroyed everything and dismantled everything, which is stupid, because if you're going to take that down, you could have provided someone in the developing world with a very good coal plant that produced a lot of power, and give them something to use until they have an alternate to carbon fuels. That's the kind of thing I would have done. Okay, this plant has to come down. Like say the Conservatives knew that Nanticoke had to be closed up by 2015, and there was this big rush to close it down before that. That really didn't make much sense to me, because it was going to be closed anyway. And when it was closed, everything in it was still pretty good. You could have taken a lot of those power generators that were there. There was at least 5 or 6 really good ones still that you could have taken them to the developing world and given somebody inexpensive power to kickstart their economy. But instead they figured, oh no, we don't want to put any more carbon into the air with these old plants. So we just wreck them. I don't think that's a practical idea. I think replacing the coal plants with gas plants that we did here in Ontario, and everybody says we replaced them with wind and solar. No, we didn't. We only replaced a small amount of them. Most of the replacement was gas plants, and it's never really talked about. But something like that, like a practical idea, the federal government wants to reduce production out west of oil and gas to meet their targets, their carbon targets. However, that means people are going to lose their jobs, and we're going to import more oil because we import 30% of our needs now. So if we shut down our capacity out west by 5%, all we do is import 5% more oil from another country and say, oh, look, we didn't make this oil, but we sure do use it. We just use it from a different place.
Yeah.
So the realistic approach seems to be lacking in our government. And I think people, as you said, want their needs to be attended to. And I think that's why Doug Ford, as many mistakes as he's made along the way, and the faux pas and green belt and all the other goof ups he's made, is still very popular because he's bringing jobs home to Ontario. He is saying, okay, what does the Ontario person want? They want jobs, they want security, and they want the standard of living to start going up. I think that has a great appeal to a lot of people. And I don't know. Do we need a future party, Canadian Future Party, a centrist party that is, by their own account, wanting to focus in on the practical issues that face everyday Canadians, primarily?
Yeah, and obviously that's going to be something that the electorate are going to have to consider in time, right?
Yeah. There's another issue I'd like to bring up, though, right now, is there's a Facebook thing that where Trump said that he's perfectly all right. It's perfectly legitimate for him to make personal attacks on his political opponents, personal attacks, and I like to put that out there too.
Yeah,
in our own government, in our own parties, the personal attacks are the things that dominate our politics right now. And are we going to walk down the road that the Americans are, where they just slur each other all day long and don't talk about the issues?
Yeah, that's a fair question, because I put that question out there on Facebook this weekend. Right, a lot of discussion. Now there's a question that's a very fair thing, and here's the thing. So I thought it was it's wrong. I've always thought it's wrong to go personal attacks, but then the question is, what's a personal attack, right? Is the fact that I believe in the last 20 years, while Dave has been the custodian of this position in Parliament, he's been defrauding the Canadian people of this amount of money, and I can prove it. Right.
All right. I got one question.
I'm now running out.
I got one question.
Dave, because I want this.
How did you know that I did that?
Yeah, exactly. That's a fair question. That is a fair question. And you see, is that a personal attack, or is that actually a commentary upon Dave's policy? I think in a way, yes, it's a commentary upon what I believe about Dave's policy, but you're absolutely correct as well. How would you know? How would a person who's not in power know that a person who is in power misapprehended public money?
Yes. I would also like to know, like, what is, like, I see Poilievre, he attacks Singh and Trudeau, and he attacks them personally. It's his policy and his policy and his policy, and this is what he is doing. Really, it is a consensus of the party. They have a party leader. But we as Canadians, unfortunately, will key up on a person rather than a party. So we like to hate a person. It's hard for us to hate a party, but we like to hate a person, like F Trudeau, F Trudeau.
I don't know that is true, because the thing is, at the moment, the person, the party, the Liberal Party in Ontario, is essentially become unelectable because of the because of Wynne and before her McGuinty.
Yeah, that's part of. Plus, you haven't been able to field a party that's reasonable in Ontario. There's not a whole lot of slurs going back and forth, except against Ford, and they're not working, right? So there's lots of personal slurs against Ford, and
but you see, the danger
it isn't working very well at all.
The danger, of course, then becomes that in about 5 or 6 years' time, that then suddenly Conservatives become unelectable in Ontario for 15 years.
Oh, possibly.
I'm not.
I'm more worried about my reservations with Poilievre right now. He's being very, very effective at slurring Singh and Trudeau rather than the NDP's policies and rather than the Liberals' policies. And I particularly don't like that aspect of Canadians who would rather hate a person as a representative of the party rather than the party itself. And the anger that builds up, and Poilievre is being expert at using that anger and focusing people's angst and anger at a person rather than a party. I don't blame him for doing that because it's very, very effective. However, he should be talking about the Liberal Party's how their policies have not been working, not Trudeau, why he's not been working. However, that's not what we're made of. We're made of we hate Trudeau, so we go after Trudeau all the time.
Actually, when it comes to personality, attacking personality, in my mind, you see, it's Trudeau's policy because he's the leader of the Liberal Party. But
it's the Liberal policy. It's the Liberal policy. It's not his alone.
Yeah, true.
He's the leader of a party that's come up with those
again in a debate between Poilievre and Trudeau. Poilievre would be saying, Trudeau would be espousing those values. Poilievre would be opposing those values. But the problem lies is that I think when it comes to personal, it's like you basically would say something of the area. Well, Trudeau doesn't understand what it would be like for a divorced woman because he's got no sympathies for that type of part of our demographic.
Maybe, but I think unfortunately that's the realities of our politics right now. Poilievre has been able to cash in on the growing unpopularity of Trudeau and keeping it going. I would rather as a member of the electorate want to know not so much about Trudeau. I want to know what his alternatives for the Liberal Party are. However, when you start getting elections and things aren't going well for the party in power, you focus in on anger at the leader of that party, and that's okay for part of it, but I don't think that should be the main thrust, and that seems to be the main thrust for Poilievre right now. And I will add though that personal attacks against Trump don't work. They don't work at all. They've been at it since 2015 on, and personal attacks against Trump.
He just turns it around, and he just turns it around and basically says, "Yeah, that's me."
He can attack personally, but anyone attacks him personally, it doesn't seem to stick. Yeah. So he can talk about Biden being pokey slow Joe. He could talk about laughing Kamala. He could talk about lock him up Hillary, and it works. But if they try to turn it around on him, it never seems to work.
Yeah.
So he's got the magic for that.
Oh, I know. Okay. Let's move off of bigger picture politics and get back to something more local. Niagara parents are alarmed at earlier start times proposed for one secondary school, particularly Stanford Collegiate in Niagara Falls. Instead of the start time being 8:35, with the day ending at 2:40, the classes in Niagara Falls will be starting half an hour earlier with an 8:05 start time, with the day ending half an hour earlier as well.
Yeah, now the big problem with this, I thought, what's the big deal? I mean, wake up your kids earlier, get them on the bus. And I thought myself, anytime they made any kind of changes to our school or anything, too bad. You just adjust to it. Quit whining.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of whining in here. But however, there's evidence to suggest that teenagers can't go to bed early enough, and they won't. And if they don't go to bed early enough, they won't get enough sleep before they go to school. So if you have earlier start times, they're going to be somewhat sleep deprived. And if they're somewhat sleep deprived, that means they're going to learn. They're not going to learn as well. I mean, they're starting at 8 o'clock. I don't know why they're starting at 8 o'clock so much, and why they didn't put it later rather than earlier. Now, the real reason why they're doing that is because there's a lot of transportation issues that they have to bus a lot of kids here, there, and everywhere. And to stagger the start times helps them out with transportation. Now, they decided to go earlier than later. When I went to school, it was 9 to 4. You know, that was a school day, 9 to 3:30, I think it was. And so why don't they move it later in the day instead of earlier in the day?
Yeah, ours was 8:55 to 4 o'clock.
Yeah, so it's a bit of the 9 to 5 sort of basically adjusted for school. Now the experts have claimed that the kids will not adjust too well to the earlier start time, that they will not go to bed early. They're just not going to do that. And they're going to be sleep deprived. They can't get out of bed. They'll be late all the time. And they won't perform as well in school. And when I first read it, I said, "Oh, quit your whining, you little brats."
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they had to adjust for an earlier time because of transportation issues and other things. So if they have to adjust earlier, why don't they adjust later? If that's an issue, I have a feeling that the teachers and stuff want to be out of their classrooms by 3 o'clock rather than 4 o'clock. And to adjust it later would be bothersome to the teachers. So if they have this problem and they have to stagger their start times for logistics reasons, why don't they start them later than earlier?
Yeah, I was going to say, hey, my dad used to be out at work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he'd come home just about the same time as we'd get home from school.
Well, definitely. My father, when I was growing up, my father had a business in Toronto, automotive machine business. He worked 12 hours every day, except Saturday where he might only work 8. And he had one day off, Sunday, most of the time. And mostly he just slept. So he was gone before we woke up in the morning.
Yeah.
And we had the latest supper on the street. Everybody else had their supper at 5. We had ours at 6:30 because we were waiting for our dad to come home. So my dad would leave in the morning, be at his shop by 6:30, and he'd come home at 6:30. You'd clock it in anywhere from 12 to 14 hours every day because it was his business, and he just had to do it. And he employed 5 guys, trying to keep them going, and so that he didn't have that luxury of and I think the kids need to be taught that. Me too. I was out the door and I'd go to work, and I would go to work for long hours, sometimes months at a time. My kids would hardly see me.
I would go to school. You see, as I said, our school started at 9, but I had a paper round that I started at 7.
Well, yeah. And were you sleep deprived?
No.
Well, there you go. That's a good example.
I don't think so.
You see, And I had a friend who had one. He was up even earlier. He had to deliver his papers by 6 in the morning. So he was up at 5.
Yeah.
And Globe and Mail back in those days was a morning paper. So he had a Globe and Mail route. And I remember him, like, I think I helped him 1 or 2 times, and it was piles and piles of snow. And he had to get all his papers because it was delivered in a certain spot. And he had tried to make sure they didn't get wet. And there was stacks of snow, and he had to mush his way through drifts while he was trying to deliver these things on time. And you know what? He was one of the best students I've ever known.
Yeah.
In school. So this, I think, like, this is a whole lot of whining. I think just get your kids to school, get them to bed earlier. If you can't do that, well, that's their problem. However, if you really do want to adjust it, if you really do want to adjust those times, adjust them later then. Like, to come in and say, oh, it's too early, what are we going to do? Well, if it's too early, then go later.
Well, you know, in a way, I am up for the early because, you know, I just think you just get used to it.
Well, you're not a kid. They say here that kids going through little kids and kids in high school need 8 to 10 hours of solid sleep a day in order to be able to perform well enough in school to be able to get the best out of it. If you're going to let your kids stay up, and if the kids stay up and you can't do that, and you can't get them and they're always tired. Another thing they don't do is eat properly. When my father was a teacher, he told his kids, look, before you come here, do something. Just get a piece of toast with a slab of peanut butter on it. That's all you have to do. Eat that. That's all. Just get in here, but don't come in here hungry, because you're dead. Like, all he sees is these dead eyes in front of them because kids are hungry and they can't eat when they can't learn when they're hungry.
Yeah.
So, number one, if your kids can't go to bed early enough, well, then try to find them some place later on. Appeal to the school board to start later, not earlier, and make sure they're fed.
All right. Anything more on that?
Nothing more, except that busing, all that busing and stuff is very, very expensive. When I went to school, they made sure that schools were within walking distance of every student. So that's where they were positioned in Scarborough. That's why the schools were where they were, is they would look at the demographic and put a school in a central location where kids could walk there. Walk there without, and every kid did. I don't remember any kid being dropped off unless they had a doctor's appointment or something and had to be dropped off later. Every kid walked. And I've told a story here when I had a gash over my right eye at school. They gave me a cloth to put over my head, eye, and I had to walk a mile, or probably walk a kilometer to the doctor's office and wait there, have them sew it up, and walk back during the wintertime because my mom and dad weren't home at that time. So I had to walk to the doctor's office and walk back on my own and walk back to school because once I got stitched up, there's nowhere else to go. There's no way my mother was going to let me go to any neighbor's house or anything, get back to school. All you had to do is have some lousy stitches. Nowadays, they go into a panic attack.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
they phone 911 if you got a stitch. I mean, how many times did I have a stitch or two at school? Holy cow.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, it seems like we're breeding weak children these days.
Yeah, and when I went to the doctor's office, he says, I don't have time to stitch it up. More than I'll put 6 stitches in it. It'll close up, and your eyebrow will grow over it, so no one will see it. So I only got time to put 6 stitches in. So he put 6 stitches in. He probably needed more like 10, but he didn't have time to do that. So he looked at was my eyebrow. He says, "Okay, well, your scar won't be seen because your eyebrow will grow over it, and so I'll just throw 6 stitches in so you go back to school." So
Yeah.
the thing is, okay, you walked here. All right, I better throw some stitches in it quick so you can walk back to school.
Yeah.
So are our kids too wimpy? Are we fawning over our kids? Oh, little Johnny, a little Janie didn't have enough sleep last night because they wanted to stay up to 12 o'clock and watch their favorite TV show instead of saying,
actually, that's part of the problem is we're pandering to our kids instead of sending them to bed.
we're not teaching them the right thing. You have to have a certain amount of discipline and resolve, and you got to be, geez, you got to have some gumption, and so I think that's part of it. But if you really did, if these if the complaints are realistic, that kids are really not performing that well and there's nothing you can do about it, they're going to stay up late, they're not going to get enough sleep. The only way to make sure they get enough sleep is that you'll have to push the start times later. So this whole business about everybody flipping out the start times are too early, well, then put them later.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So municipalities in Ontario municipalities actually they are the Association of Municipalities of Ontario are asking the Ontario government to appoint a minister to address the housing needs and addiction crisis that we have across the province.
Yeah, we covered this somewhat with Senator McKinnon on Friday. And in that particular case, we focused in on Cisco.
Yeah.
In this particular case, the municipalities of Ontario are doing pretty much the same thing that Cisco had asked. We definitely need a dedicated source of funding for the massive amounts of money that our municipalities are laying out, taking care or trying to take care of our homeless people, our drug addicted people, and are basically that group of people. It's a growing problem. They take enormous amounts of resources to take care of, and so we need money. It's not like the Roxham Road asylum seekers that the federal government pays for their bills when they're in hotels and need food and stuff like that. So we're not talking about them. We're talking about the homeless people who don't have that kind of resource. We don't have that kind of resource money. So the municipalities of Ontario are appealing to the Ontario government. We need more funding. We need some source of cash to come in to help us with this.
Yeah, they're looking
all getting together and making their voice heard.
And they're looking for basically Ontario to take charge of a meeting across the province to discuss how these public services can be funded and delivered more effectively.
Yeah, as we've pointed out, this is an ongoing problem, and I don't know how many times in this show, in the creation of this show, homeless. That is something we keep coming back to and keep discussing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And yet, in the whole time we've discussed this, 5 years or whatever, has anything changed? Nothing much really has changed. The homeless are still the homeless. That problem is growing. There still hasn't been an adequate solution or even part of a solution to address that issue. Why is that? Is it due to funding, or is it due to the approach that we're using? I'm not so sure. It seems to be something that befuddles all of us, our politicians, me included. How do we reverse this trend? How do we take our homeless people, who are, many of them in the homeless situation are drug addicted and mental health, but there's many that aren't. And even those who are, they're going to need treatment. They need to come back into society somehow. Living on the fringes in a tent is not going to do it. And we can give them as many resources as possible. Make sure they're fed, make sure they have the medical, all other kinds of things. But the main thing is we have to reintegrate them into society where they have a life. Living on the fringes of society in a wealthy country and wealthy province is befuddling. And myself, just I don't know what to do, and I don't think anyone else does. I don't know if throwing a whole lot more money at it will do anything, but it will relieve the pressure on the municipalities, that's for sure, and the local taxpayer.
Part of the problem is that the issue is felt most at the municipal level, because it's at the municipal level that the real problems exist, right? That people, the people are homeless, but it's not municipal. And this is where one of the challenges we face. It's not municipal funding. Municipalities are not the people who fund the way out of this solution. But in a way, I think it's multifaceted, because we need more jobs. We need more high value jobs, particularly, right? We need to basically stop being in a poverty, what I would call a poverty cycle. We need to break the cycle of poverty.
Yes. I don't even know if that's going to work. You can say stuff like that. You and I can say things like we're going to sort of get the cycle of poverty out of there. But how do you do that? Now, how do you do that when you have a lot of mental health issues and addiction issues going on? And those, and with our mental health care facilities around, we know that the mental health of most of the people there are not going to get attended to, because we just don't have the resources, and the resources we do have are extremely ineffective. Believe me, I know. And so there goes that. Addiction. If you don't have the resources to treat people for addiction, and believe me, these people addicts will always go through, I want to get off the stuff I'm on. And if there's a program available, it's half-assed. Where are those programs? I don't know. So we are in a situation where all we're doing really is asking the province to increase the taxes, basically, so that we can have a fund that they can feed to the municipalities to take care of the growing homeless problem. We really, rather than taxes increase the municipal taxes to take care of this problem, the funding of this problem, we're going to ask the province to do it, which means our provincial taxes will go up. Basically, the taxpayer will still pay for it.
Yeah.
Will it be more efficient, though?
Well, but again, one could also argue that, in fact, actually, where we need to have, there's probably the money in our system, or political system already. One could argue that, in fact, actually, a lot of that money doesn't get fed down to the municipalities in the programs it needs to be fed down in.
Well, there is a point where you say, okay, we need money from the province, but the $1,000 that comes from the province, how much of it actually gets here, we don't know.
Yeah,
that's a good point. And you're setting up another level of bureaucracy, basically. But the point
that's always a problem.
The point that the municipalities make is it's costing us too much money. And if you are a municipal politician, you are going to be loath to increase the taxes of your municipal residents to take care of a homeless situation by saying to your residents, you're going to have to pay more because we have all these homeless people. You're much better off saying, well, the province will have to give us some money to take care of this. I don't want to increase taxes. I don't want to get the anger and anger up of our residents. And if you take a place like St. Catharines, who have a much bigger problem we do, it's costing them much more than it's costing us. they have a good point. Like how much money do you want to extract from the average citizen in this municipality to pay for that? We need help.
Yeah.
So I think probably there will be money coming, but there is the Ontario government has made this point over and over again. We shell out huge amounts of money for this to the municipalities already.
Yep.
So the problem still exists. Throwing more money at it, that's just a Band-Aid.
Arguably, we got to do, the problem seems, I don't know, we can throw this around a million ways.
Yeah, it's a problem we've talked about endlessly for the last 5 years or so on this show, and constantly, forever, it keeps coming up. Constantly and forever, nothing changes. Constantly and forever, it just gets worse.
We and again, some respects we know that something has to change. I believe that what we need is more better paid jobs, but it's the how we bring them about that's a key issue.
Jobs are definite, but once you are homeless and try to get out of that homeless state, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Your resources, quite often, unfortunately, your resources go towards substance to relieve the pain and anxiety of where you are, and sort of get yourself into a home and make that transition. And then what do you get? You get a minimum wage paying job, usually, because you've been out of the workforce. That's the only thing left for you. And there's two ways of looking at it. Well, finally, I'm on my road back to a real life. And the other one is look at, oh man, how can I start a real life when I have no prospects for the future except for minimum paying jobs? So this is, I don't know. I think we do not know how to fix it. We don't. We know how to pay for it, but we don't know how to fix it. And I just don't know what next move we're going to make.
All right. So Ford is making some changes to his cabinet. Not many, with a few. Jill Dunlop is the new Minister of Education. Nolan Quinn is the new Minister of Colleges and Universities. Kevin Holland has joined the cabinet as a new Associate Minister of Forestry and Forest Products as part of the Ministry of Natural Resources. And Graham McGregor has joined the cabinet as new Associate Minister of Auto Theft and Bail Reform. That last one is the one that intrigues me. But I also note that, that Association of Municipalities idea, of course, isn't reflected in this lot.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Okay, so Associate Minister of Auto Theft and Bail Reform.
There's a sign of our times, isn't it?
Yeah.
Auto theft has been the sort of a focus on the law and order of our age. It's happening everywhere in the States and Canada, where people can steal a car and then get bail and get right back on the street and steal another one the same day.
Yeah.
It's big business. We are in a situation where a Canadian man has followed his car all the way to Dubai or something. I forget where it went. He knows this car was stolen. He could tell the police exactly where it was in the Montreal shipping yard. They could do nothing about it because of technicalities. So he was able to follow his truck all the way to where it was, right from the ship to wherever it went in some country. And then that country it was offloaded there, and he could tell everybody, there's my car, wherever it was. I think somewhere in the Middle East, but there's my truck right there. That's it. I told the local police. I told the RCMP. I've told Interpol. I've told everybody, here it is. And nobody can give him his truck back once again, and which was ridiculous. So that's a big deal that's happening right now, and that's a sign of our times, where car theft and the bail provided for those criminals who are stealing it is so easy to get that they can just get back on the street again and do it all over.
Yeah.
We found that when they had a big bust in Toronto, they cracked down on a couple of guys that were stealing cars and trucks. But what happened was they took them to the police station and they let them out on bail, because bail is easy to get. Where those guys went, who knows? They'll just disappear into the ether.
That's I think why Mr. Ford is looking at auto theft and bail reform.
Yeah, because it's a new reality, and bail reform, I suppose, has to have a real look at it, as we've been told constantly.
Well, and here's the thing:
a criminal, somebody who does a crime, gets back out in the street and does it the same day.
Yeah. And here's the question about this bail reform stuff, is that if you're bailing a person out and they're committing the same crime the next day, and surely it's like, would you think of it any different if it was your car they went and subsequently stole?
Yeah, you definitely don't want a guy to get a bail and just then steal your neighbor's car after you stole your car.
Yeah.
And you don't want to say, my car is right there in that sea can right there. And the cop says, well, sorry about that. Can't give you your car back. A lot of these reforms are going to be driven by insurance companies too, by the way. They don't like that. They don't like that one bit. A truck gets stolen and it's right there to give it back to the owner. And the police can't do anything about it. The government can't do anything about it. And they can watch that sea can go across the world to another spot and be offloaded and be sold, and they can't, their hands are tied. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So the insurance companies don't like that one bit. And talk about lobby in government. Insurance companies got powerful lobbies.
Yeah. And that something needs to change in that regard, We are letting people out on the streets way too easily.
Yeah, it's really nice to be kind and generous to people who have gone astray, but all that does is encourage those people who've gone astray to go even more astray. It might shock the odd person into getting back in line and walk the straight and narrow, but more than often it just encourages thieves to keep going.
Yeah. All right. It's an interesting one. Niagara police get to the root of a Welland, Ontario tree carving mystery, and they make an arrest. So this person has been adding gruesome, I don't know, gruesome. They've been adding pictures to trees, so they've been carving
carving faces in healthy trees. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Now my problem here is that or issue here is the different ideas. Like I think the people in downtown Welland thinks these are unique carvings and it was kind of cool. However, the city's not too impressed, because these trees will likely die much younger than they should. And within 5 years, they could be dead, because what has happened when he carves a face in a living tree, he damages it, he hurts it. He weakens that tree. So those trees who have lived to long enough to have a trunk big enough to have a face carved in them will now die much younger than they should. That's going to cost the city money to replace that tree. It's also going to reduce the ability of that tree to do what it does. And one of these faces, is a mean old skull face. That's not going to appeal to everyone. If a person like this wants to do carvings, you should do it already on wood that's already dead. Take a big hunk of wood and carve it like other people I know do. I know a chainsaw guy that can make statues with a chainsaw. He's really good at it. But he does it on wood that's already been felled, a tree that's already been felled. So that, I think, if this guy really wants to be that creative, he can make these offerings to the city without having to damage a living tree.
There's a tree sculpture at St. Patrick's Church around on Victoria, which has obviously been done with the permission of the church.
Why? What's the image?
I don't remember what the image is. It's a little while since I've been there, but I think it was religious. I think it's it's a tree sculpture, which is quite nice.
In a living tree?
I don't think it's a living tree. I think it's a dead tree.
Well, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
If St. Pat's is giving its thumbs up, go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
But if St. Pat's would not approve of that happening on a living tree,
living trees.
There's a big difference there.
Question. Yeah, absolutely different question. Yeah.
Yeah, altogether. Now, this guy's obviously quite talented. He can carve faces and all that other stuff. But number one, he's carved faces that not everybody's going to like on living trees.
Yeah.
He's done that on his own. And what he's done is he should be fined for damaging those trees and costing the city money and putting a face on a tree that not everybody's going to like without approval. I think if he found a dead tree or a big log and then carved it and then put it up and said, I'm offering the city these sculptures, and if they like them, they could keep them up. But the fact of the matter is, he's damaging a living tree, which we should never do.
Yeah. All right. I think we've kind of come to the end. We've come to the end pretty much there.
Yes. And do we have anybody listening to us today? I didn't see any comments.
I didn't see any comments. No, there weren't any comments today. We have got people listening with just no comments. We get them on some days, right? Some days we get a lot of comments and some days we get none.
Okay. Anyway, without further ado, I bid you adieu. Thanks for listening for those who did.
Yeah, and hopefully back on Facebook.